Red Bull is completely lost with car troubles, Mercedes abandons its spa-spec floor after balance issues, and Ferrari is looking strong after a new front wing. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Ferrari team boss Fred Vasseur says the legality of McLaren's controversial Mini DRS rear wing was a black and white matter after the FIA intervened to request it be changed. Ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix, McLaren said it would be making modifications to its rear wing design in the wake of controversy about its flexing characteristics. Onboard footage from Oscar Piastri's car in last week's Azerbaijan Grand Prix had revealed that the rear wing's upper element was flexing to help open up the slot gap, helping reduce drag to improve top speed. Following analysis by the FIA about the design, it emerged on the Friday in Singapore that the governing body felt the behavior of the wing did not comply with the regulations, so asked for it to be modified. McLaren later confirmed that it had agreed to the request and would be making changes. While the issue of flexing rear wings has popped up over recent days, it comes in the wake of season-long intrigue over the aeroelasticity of front wings. However, Vasseur says that teams exploiting flexing rear wings is a totally different ballgame in terms of where it sits with the regulations and recommendations of relevant technical directives, TD. I think there is a kind of confusion between what's happened with the front wing and the rear wing, said Vasseur in Singapore. The front wing, we all agree that it could be a gray area because the first paragraph of the TD is saying that you can't design a part of the car with the intention of the deformation. Intention is difficult to manage. But the rear wing story, it's completely different because in the article, you have also a maximum deflection, and this is black or white. It's no gray, no dark gray, no light gray. It's black and white, and for me, it's clear. With the rear wing issue having only come to prominence after the Baku race, Vasseur said there was an element of frustration that McLaren had benefited from the design in previous races. He says Ferrari's analysis showed the wing had been used at other low downforce venues like the Italian GP, where Piastri and Lando Norris finished second and third. We all saw the video and the pictures of this, added Vasseur. It's a bit frustrating when, if you remember perfectly the situation in Monza, we had 5 cars in 0.02 of a second, actually 0.075s. You can move from P1, P2 to P5 or P6 for 0.02 of seconds. In Baku, we arrived 10 laps in a row side by side in turn 1. You can imagine that we have a bit of frustration. While the focus on the McLaren rear wing developed over recent days, one route that could have been open to Ferrari in Baku was to protest it and bring the matter to a head there. Asked if such a move had been on the cards, Vasseur said, "It could have been possible, but it's not so easy to have the evidence required. But now, honestly, I want to turn this page because I want to be focused on the future. Baku and Monza are behind us. We have still 7 races to go. We have to win this weekend, and it will be the best reply that we can give." Lewis Hamilton reckons he and Mercedes feel a little bit lost with his W15 setup for the Singapore Grand Prix after struggling throughout Friday practice. The Briton only managed to go 12th fastest in FP1, and despite improving to 11th in the second practice session of the day, he was notably unimpressed with his car's handling traits. Radio traffic between he and race engineer Pete Bonington suggested that the 7-time champion was lacking traction out of the slower corners on the Marina Bay circuit, Hamilton feeling that understeer was one of the key mitigating factors. Speaking after FP2, Hamilton reported that the team had attempted to make a lot of changes to his re-liveried car for the weekend, but nothing seemed to stick. "This car for me, it feels it's been a very difficult, very challenging day," Hamilton said of his Friday experience in Singapore. "We've tried everything setup-wise and nothing seems to work with the setup. It's definitely very challenging. We're really giving it everything and then you find out you're a second off. I think ultimately we're just a little bit lost at the moment. We're not really sure where to put the car." Asked if changes between FP1 and FP2 had helped, Hamilton responded, "They didn't do anything. We tried a lot and achieved the same thing. At the moment, we won't be going into Q3. His teammate George Russell also struggled with his Mercedes balance. He suffered a moment during FP2 when he locked up at turn 8 and ended up going into the wall at low speed. Beyond a broken front wing and crumpled nose, the Mercedes was relatively damage-free. He noted that the car was feeling not well connected compared to previous weekends, but nonetheless targeted the gap between the early pace-setters in Ferrari and McLaren and the teams behind. Not a lot to say about the crash, really. I locked up, took the front wing off, but it was a really challenging Friday for us, Russell explained. We were really off the pace today. We need to understand why that is. I'm sure we'll find some answers tonight. We've made some progress from FP1 into FP2, but the car is just not really feeling that well connected as it was this time 12 months ago and in recent races. We need to try and get to the bottom of it. There's a lot of surprises out there. You've got the RBs who are really quick, you've got the Williams. The Red Bulls seem to be off the pace, and there seems to be a big gap to the McLarens and the Ferrari. As a minimum, we hope to be in between that midfield gap and the front four, but right now we've got a lot of work on our hands. Red Bull says that nothing is working with its Formula One car in Singapore after a disappointing opening day of practice. While Sergio Perez ended up 8th overall in the more representative second session, Max Verstappen was left languishing down in 15th, more than 1.2 seconds adrift of pace setter and title rival Lando Norris. It is understood that the key problem the team is chasing is a complete lack of grip, which it believes is being caused by neither of its drivers being able to fire up their tires into the right operating window. Verstappen's situation was also not helped by Red Bull trialing out running him on a lower downforce level, which will have had an impact on both general car performance and the energy being put into the tires. Speaking after the day's running, Red Bull Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko said, "On Max's car, nothing is working. On both the soft and the hard tire, he doesn't get any grip and he doesn't have any balance at all." Verstappen himself said that the problems Red Bull was encountering were different to 12 months ago, when it was more about setup around the bumps and curbs. "We didn't have the grip that we would have liked on the tires, so I felt like we were sliding a lot more than usual," he said. This caused us particular issues in FP2, which wasn't really a positive session for us. We haven't so much been struggling with the bumps and the curbs, but it was more about the general grip of the tires. We are going to have to go back and analyze the data and see what we can do to optimize the performance with the car and the tires so we can improve ahead of qualifying. Perez was equally disconcerted by those difficulties, explaining, "I think it took us a surprise. And yeah, definitely we got some work to do overnight because we are quite far. We are nearly a second off the pace, so we need quite a big change to be able to come through. Yeah, we'll see what we are able to do." Red Bull does not have any immediate answers as to what is going on with its RB20 in Singapore, and the team will be hoping that overnight work on its simulator in Milton Keynes can offer some answers. Asked if it was a concern, Marko said, "At the moment, I would say it is very worrying. For sure, we have to try something drastically now. Let's see what we can try." And while Red Bull has long known that its car concept is not ideal for bumpy street tracks, Marko insisted that there was no excuse. "We can't accept that," he said. "We have to sort things out to make sure that we are more competitive. I just watched and we are on the same pace as Franco Colapinto." McLaren insists it is not the only Formula One team under scrutiny for a FLEXI rear wing, despite the intrigue over its mini DRS. The Woking-based team has been at the center of attention since winning last weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix after footage of Oscar Piastri's rear wing was broadcast. The rear-facing onboard camera showed the upper element of the rear wing rotating back, helping open up the slot gap, which will have helped deliver a straight-line speed boost. This behavior has caught the attention of rival teams, with it triggering some demands for clarification from the FIA about what is and is not allowed in terms of flexible bodywork. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur is understood to be concerned about the situation and is expected to voice his thoughts during an official FIA press conference on Friday. But while the spotlight is on McLaren, the Constructors' Championship leader has made clear that it believes it is not the only team playing around with such FLEXI tricks. Asked if it felt rivals had been caught out by McLaren pushing the boundaries more than others, chief designer Rob Marshall said, "I wouldn't say they're exploiting it less than McLaren. I wouldn't say McLaren are exploiting it. I would say that everyone's approaching their wing design in the way they think is best. But you look at them, I mean, obviously for whatever reason we are talking about ours at the moment. But I mean, everyone can see everyone else's as well. I don't think we are the only people under scrutiny." Autosport understands that there are at least two other teams whose designs have prompted the attention of rivals for either the slot gap width or the way the whole rear wing rotates backwards. While the FIA has said that it is evaluating evidence from Baku to decide if it needs to intervene with what teams are doing, Marshall said that its discussions with the governing body have been straightforward. There's continued dialogue with the FIA week in, week out, day in, day out with various aspects of the cars, he said. So yes, there has been talks, but on what aspects of it I wouldn't want to focus on. He did explain, however, that the sole basis of any discussions was about compliance with the regulations, not about the behavior of car parts. You discussed the requirements of the regulations and whether you are compliant with the regulations, he said. I mean, you don't have to talk about the aeroelastics and characteristics. It's not what the FIA are interested in. They want to ensure that the cars that are delivered to the circuit are compliant with the regulations and any directives and any opinion they may have. You work with them to ensure that, and away you go. Marshall also felt that the attention being given to McLaren was simply the result of the team being successful on track. It's very flattering, but obviously the nearer the front you are, the more scrutiny you come under, he said. I mean, all teams scrutinize their own cars as well as other people's. We scrutinize our car, we work with the FIA to understand the gray areas of whatever element the car is and move forward accordingly, really. Asked what he made of the comments of rival teams, Marshall said, I don't know really, they've all got their opinions. We work with the FIA to establish the legality of our car. As long as the FIA are happy, that's the only opinion we need to worry about. Ferrari has arrived in Singapore with a revised front wing arrangement that it hopes will help unlock extra performance from the SF24 car. The Italian outfit has been much more competitive over the last few races thanks to the introduction of a new floor at the Italian Grand Prix, and it is hoped the minor tweak this weekend will give it more setup options to optimize car balance. While introducing an aero upgrade like a new front wing is not usual for street venues, Ferrari's senior performance engineer Jacques Clear has explained why his squad has taken the plunge. Singapore is not the obvious circuit where you would bring an aero upgrade, he said. It's a very draggy, high downforce circuit, so the wing is not specific for this circuit, but basically it's just moving the energy a little further inboard. If you look at it closely, you'll see that the inboard is a bit more aggressive and the outboard a bit less aggressive, so we've moved that dynamic a little bit. This allows us to crank on a bit more downforce. Here, you're probably going to want to have maximum rear downforce, and you're going to want to get a balance. Balance is everything around here, and we've been a little bit backed into a corner at some of the high downforce circuits before because we're running out of front power. It's just a little more powerful at the top end, slightly more efficient, but it really is that it's a bit more powerful. That gives us a bit more scope. The new front wing is an evolution of its predecessor, with many of the design features retained, albeit more deliberate in their approach. In terms of the actual design changes to the wing, aside from the obvious flap geometry changes, the design of the spoon-shaped transition from the center of the main plane has been altered. This will, in turn, provide a different aerodynamic reaction from the nose assembly. Meanwhile, the outboard section of the flaps has been redesigned where they meet with the end plate. This is in order to enhance the outwash effect being generated and alter the wake generated by the wheel and tire assembly behind. The new flap tips are much more roundly curved, left image below, and the supporting metalwork that had previously been employed has been cast aside, which will alter their dynamic behavior as a consequence. Ferrari will also undoubtedly benefit from a wing designed with a greater ability to exploit aeroelasticity, given the FIA's clearance of solutions fielded by its rivals in recent races. The ability to relax the flaps under load, for example, will allow the team to set up the car with more downforce, knowing it won't be penalized by the drag that would ordinarily occur. It's a win-win that should not only contribute to improving the car's balance, but also help with tire degradation over a stint too. These alterations should help to tie in with the aforementioned floor updates introduced at Monza. This will help further widen its operating window, resulting in a more benign aerodynamic platform and more predictable handling characteristics. The new floor has undergone an extensive reimagining of all the surfaces involved, with the floor fences reconfigured, the underfloor tunnel expansion revised, the floor edge and edge wing reprofiled, and a new boat tail section in the transition to the diffuser. The troubled Spa floor, which triggered some uncertainties for Mercedes, looks set to never return to action in Formula One. Just before the summer break, Mercedes brought an upgraded floor to the Belgian Grand Prix that it hoped would lead to another form improvement in 2024. However, after some confusing behavior with the car in practice as the team experimented with setups, the German manufacturer removed it for the race as Lewis Hamilton went on to take an unexpected triumph. Despite the troubles of its Spa debut, Mercedes was convinced that the new floor was a step forward in performance, so committed to bringing it back into action. It conducted back-to-back experiments with the new floor at both the Dutch and Italian Grand Prix, eventually concluding that it was indeed better and so raced with it. However, following some relatively disappointing performances in those races compared to how strong Hamilton and George Russell had been before the summer break, Mercedes elected not to take the floor to Baku last weekend to evaluate how the W15 performed without it. But with the squad still enduring a weekend of fluctuating fortunes where its performance patterns are not totally clear, it has elected to stick with the old floor for Singapore again this weekend. It is understood that the situation has also been encouraged by its spare part situation and the logistics of back-to-back races. And now, as work at the factory is focused on a new upgraded floor that is coming for the United States Grand Prix, it means the Spa floor will be consigned to history unless the Austin design proves to be a total flop. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff said that the balance problems that the team has faced recently with the W15 seem to be common with both the old and new floor. Speaking about what happened in Baku with the old floor, Wolff said, "We still suffered from the same balance performance that we have on the new floor. So in Singapore, we still have the same one. We need to race that. But from Austin onwards, we would probably go to a new spec." Speaking about the Austin upgrades that were coming, Trackside Engineering Director Andrew Shovlin said this week that the step would be quite big. "Well, as you know, the spec of the car is always evolving. We're always trying to bring performance every race," he explained. "But at the moment, our main focus is on bringing a bigger package to Austin. Then we get into the final 6 races of the year, and there will be smaller things beyond that. But certainly what we're working for at the moment is a bigger update to the car at the Austin race." That's it for today's video. I'll see you around.